challenge of the sequel is etched in history, from albums, books and movies. For every Empire Strikes Back we have a Highlander 2, for every The Bends we have a Dead Ringer, and for every Street Fighter 2 we have a Devil May Cry 2. With Sucker Punch's latest Ghosts of Yotei, the sequel to 2020's classic Ghost of Tsushima, they have that weight on their shoulders. Now, unlike an album, the team do not have to change everything to be a success. In fact, it's often best to retain over 50% of what worked. Thus, the resulting gameplay, world, skills and organic world remain. Improved, expanded in design, mechanics and technical areas, but still relying on the core game engine and pillars as before. On a technical footing, the team have refined and iterated on the first game, rather than throw the baby out with the bathwater. Although the engine has not changed drastically, it has seen improvements in many areas. The resolution and frame rates are higher, potentially, with no signs of checkerboard rendering this time on base or pro consoles. As an art-first game, like the original, that takes centre stage, driving much of the majesty, mood and cinematography. The opening moments, Mount Yotei, not Fuji, looms in the ever-present omnidistance. Foliage, trees, rocks, wildlife in horses, birds, wolves and more now utilise the same dense particle system as before. One which includes blowing winds, clove petals, billowing pampas grass or debris. Volumetric clouds and fog volumes billow around Yotei's peak, rolling across the sky with a silver edge and Fresnel light, bringing darker, deeper lighting and even heavy rainstorms, with lighting being a key element along with tone mapping for the game's visual identity. Further improved detail comes from 4K authored textures, normal maps, supplementing the tessellated and parallax occlusion geometry and grounds. The triangle-based grass and foliage have increased, making areas even denser with improved level of detail switching and draw distance over the first game, significantly. The game still is fully interactive and alive as it sways with the wind, flattens or bends underfoot or hoof, and even chopped down during battle or practice. Snow falls on the ground and crunches underfoot, rain falls and billows off of the edge of buildings or hats, and all of this improves every muddy locale, yawning sun-kissed grass field, dishevelled inns or jaded face, be they your next friend or foe.
鬼の大将も貸しがあるが、てめえのツケの方が大事か。
おい、そんなこと言ってねえ。
Now, character models, facial bone rigs, triangle count and rendering materials and lighting accuracy are also a step up. The game still uses dynamic animation and physics-based locomotion along with combat, including inverse kinematics. They can create some robotic faces, animation warping and other oddities as before. The in-game narrative sections and models are not as detailed or as dense as the real-time cinematic ones, which also increase texture quality, materials, lighting rigs, polygon count and animation levels, complemented by motion and performance capture, but they do work in driving the game's character progression well, with the more important sections really increasing the quality here. One of the reasons is all of these use the best of the 3 modes on PS5, 4 modes on PS5 Pro, including limiting them to 30 FPS on both. Another technical improvement is the addition of ray tracing in the game's lighting model, something I noted from the first trailer and mentioned on X. Accelerated by the ray tracing hardware inside all PlayStation 5s, this is only available in the high fidelity ray tracing mode or during the real-time cutscenes. Now, it improves the accuracy of the light bounce and ambient occlusion and shadows over the other 2 modes, which rely on the previous game's image-based light probes converted to spherical harmonics across a range of fixed times of day. Now, this still runs underneath the ray tracing, which samples a single light source, sun or moon, and calculates indirect radiosity, global illumination, on static and dynamic objects, adding light bounce and improved shadow on horses' legs or kimonos. Notice the light bounce on Atsu's face and the extra shade on her hands and kimono sleeve from that GI bounce. Again, here the sunlight bounces off the floor onto the cave ceiling's character's face and increases the shade within those deeper recesses. The results can vary from instantly better, reducing light leakage, floaty objects, grounding objects far better with improved occlusion and light reaction and radiosity. But in other sections, both indoor and out, the change can be minimal to invisible, with it working best as sunlight beams into an interior hut, inn or cave or such, allowing light to attenuate and bounce more realistically. The objects contained within the BVH structure include static and dynamic characters such as Atsu herself, other NPCs. Here you can notice the additional light shade on trousers with ray tracing on the secondary character and the horses in the background, and the radiosity of other object surfaces are brought onto those areas as well. See the yellow glow on the cave ceiling from the rock, or the sand bounce onto the wooden log. These apples paint a subtle red hue onto the wood. Now in my side-by-side comparisons and these back and forth here, you can see the roof struts of the hut are illuminated by the sun's bounce, including bouncing light from the hut onto the edge of the pillars, but also the additional shaded areas that are now occluded by themselves and other objects far more accurately, improving the lighting accuracy immensely. See here as the wooden plinth edge highlights light leakage from the door not being a correct occluder of the sun in the performance mode without RT, but with RT on, the wood is shaded and more accurate to real light reactions, including the door edge now having a light bounce on the bottom. The ray tracing seems to include a great deal of geometry within it, but the bounce is localized within a few feet of objects and frustum depth to aid performance costs, with long stretching views not being that different between modes. Now on PS5, this mode locks performance to 30 FPS in gameplay during real-time cinematics. On both base PS5 and the PS5 Pro, all cutscenes are capped to 30 FPS across all modes. The base PS5 ray tracing mode uses dynamic scaling with counts from approximately 3200 by 1800 in gameplay and around 1440 1588p, which retains much of the sharpness of the quality mode. Now on Pro, it remains the same, but locks itself pretty much at the 1800p all the time. The other exclusive mode though, titled Ray Tracing Pro, offers the best of both. The same 4K output of quality and Ray Trace GI, but now at 60 FPS. Again, cutscenes remain at 30. Now this appears to use PSSR though, with the engine now scaling lower than base PS5 to enable the halving of the frame time to consistently hit that 60 FPS rate, with a counted low of approximately 1260p, although there was a couple of points that I counted 1080p, so this is either the base and then it's reconstructed back, or, like the other modes, it scales dynamically and reconstructs back to 4K. The excellent image quality and stability of the game, specifically with so much foliage, sub-pixel detail and geometry, is impressive, and this mode enhances the gameplay due to the faster and more responsive input times and refresh. The difference between Ray Tracing 1800p and Ray Tracing Pro PSSR is quite small, with PSSR sometimes offering better high frequency detail and stability on grounds and sharper textures, along with less particle trails than the game's TAA solution, ironically less ghosting. But in others it can be more unstable, with moire patterns on large textures such as this cartographer's map under movement, or the ambient occlusion amongst grass, which is handled better even in the performance mode, which all modes use screen space shadows and screen space ambient occlusion to improve the visual fidelity. So the modes have a trade-off, but the impact and improved performance and visual quality means for pro players, the Ray Tracing Pro mode is the clear winner.
校内上等な弓蝦夷地中探したかて他にないでかけてもええ
A higher resolution quality mode retains the 30 FPS cap whilst improving details via a resolution boost, but it removes the ray trace lighting during gameplay, reverting to the image-based lighting solution present in the prior games on PS4 and PS5, just improved here. This mode keeps everything cleaner and crisper via a native 4K, which appears fixed on PS5 Pro, but on PS5 it appears to scale to an approximate low of 1800p in the heaviest sections. The result is both consoles achieve the target well enough to not care and convince. Now, last but not least, a high frame rate performance mode targets 60 FPS during gameplay with minor cuts to visuals and image quality. Again, the real-time cinematics still run at 30 FPS and retain the ray trace lighting and high resolution for the improved fidelity. Thankfully though, the excellent combat system benefits greatly from the improved frame time and lower input latency it offers via that 16 millisecond frame time rather than 33. Now on base PlayStation 5, we scale from 2560 by 1440 down to 1920 by 1080. It still looks great with a clean, sharp and stable image, although it is softer than all other modes, but again, in combat you won't really notice this. Now the Pro gets the same mode with tweaks. Well, one. It now targets that same 1800p output of the RT mode with DRS, but often now just stays around 1800p, but a low of 1620p was spotted. Now this means that the Pro is delivering anywhere of around 56% higher resolution over the base console at the same visual settings and frame rate. Now this mode is the best option for those Pro players that prefer the sharpest visuals and fastest gameplay that cut like a knife. Well, a sword. Now performance is exceptional. All modes, all consoles, 30 or 60 are evenly paced, and 60 is close to locked on both consoles, and the game only drops a handful of frames here and there in all tested sections. Now, some odd dips did occur during a couple of battles, even in the 30 FPS ray tracing mode, but these look to be context or contention issues rather than anything bigger than that, and they can cause 100 millisecond plus spikes when entering a face-off or even killing a foe. I did find that restarting the game fixed these issues, because I also had a couple of crashes to the operating system after a few hours of play. So the dreaded memory juggling may also be a factor, but a day one patch is due on launch, and it actually just dropped as I completed the end of this video, delayed due to personal circumstances I'm afraid, and this may resolve those isolated and minor issues. In fact, the only repeatable dips are using the sections where you can walk between periods, which reloads the entire scene with new lighting, objects and models, and this has around 100 millisecond cost from the SSD I/O getting the data in and out of RAM. Now, it's not noticeable in play, and it shows you how much they are managing here in such a large, dense and packed world to fit into the console RAM budget. No matter which mode or console you play on, the game runs exceptionally well and dips far less than the original did on base and Pro PS4. Now, the other big benefit from such an action and timing based game to performance is input latency. The time it takes from pressing a button or moving the sticks or mouse and something happening on screen. Now, as long-term viewers know, I have been covering it since I started the channel back in 2013 now, and it's as big a deal as ever. Now here, going from the heaviest mode in quality due to its high resolution and 33 millisecond frame time, we get a median input time of 114.75 milliseconds, using a mix of camera and action inputs. Now for a 30 FPS game, this is actually quite good, and certainly far from the worst I have tested before, but for such a frantic game, sub 100 milliseconds should be the expectation. And 30 FPS games make that much harder to achieve, and that is where the performance mode and the PS5 Pro exclusive ray tracing mode make an even bigger stride, with them both being significantly faster and well below that 100 millisecond threshold. Unsurprisingly, the PS5 Pro ray tracing mode is the fastest, being some 38% faster than quality mode at 71 milliseconds, and performance is marginally slower at 83.5 milliseconds, still 27% faster than quality, with them both being 30 to 40 plus milliseconds faster than that slowest mode, which anyone can feel and appreciate. Now, the final piece of the performance puzzle is loading, and it's cartridge level fast here, with the journey from the main operating system to dash straight into the last save seamless and instant. No splash screen, menu or anything. Straight into your last moment with no friction or delay, in less than 10 seconds. Superb. Fast travel is also incredibly quick and easy,